Tonia, welcome back. How are you doing?
I am doing great today. How are you?
I am well. It's the middle of the week. Some people, mostly single people, call it hump day.
Yeah.
So it is that day. But yes, I'm looking forward to the weekend because I'm finally going to get my tires rotated and my oil changed. Da, da, da,
Okay.
da.
Okay, this has been a long time coming, has it?
Yes, yes. As I realized as I got older, that these are the things that excite me. Instead of going to like the club or the bar on a Friday or a Saturday, I get my tires rotated and my oil change. And for those listening, that isn't code for something else. I'm actually bringing my car, my automobile, to the mechanic for those things. I just realized that it could have meant something else.
People could take that the wrong way. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Like so many things, right? But I'm just glad that you're back, and we're gonna, as we mentioned, we're gonna help people get married. 2.5 kids,
Yeah. Fence, picket fence.
the dog.
Yes. And so that everybody can be normal.
Yes, and move out of
Yeah.
the city, ladies and gentlemen. Come into the suburbs. It's so much quieter, right?
I just actually closed my window because I thought the birds would be too loud for our recording. And so
Oh my goodness. No, you didn't. You told the birds to go home and do something else. I
I
totally,
told the
totally
birds
get
to
it.
stay as you are, and I'm going to adjust my circumstances to manage my needs, is what happened.
Ooh, I like that. So why don't we just jump right into it? Reintroduce yourself to my audience. Let them know who you are and, of course, where they can find you.
Sure. My name is Tanya. Officially, it's Dr. Tonia Winchester. I've been in practice as a naturopathic doctor since 2007. I'm also a mind body healing coach, and I help people to heal and release pain from the past so that they can be present, kind, connected, and really do what it is they want to do in this short lifetime. And people can find me at tonyawinchester.com. That's Tonia Winchester.com.
Perfect. So welcome back. Actually, I don't know how this came up, but I was watching a movie and it was actually a horror movie named after Winchester,
Oh, isn't there
like the
that
gun.
supernatural show? Is it, but you watched the movie?
Yes.
Okay.
I watched the movie and I was watching it because as I was preparing for our interview, not that I have to watch horror movies to prep for you. It was just, I don't know why I tied that together, but I was watching a horror movie. And when I saw the last name, I was like, how come I haven't noticed this before? So it was like a small world. It was like, what's that? It was like a self-fulfilling prophecy,
Oh. Yeah, I
right?
guess I mean, the name's also connected to the gun manufacturers. But yes, I've had people, I don't watch that show, Supernatural, and I didn't even know that there was a movie for it or of it. But I've had people stop me being like, oh my gosh, I love your characters. And I was like, my characters, like I have nothing to do with this program whatsoever. But yeah, apparently there's two brothers the Winchester brothers that go fight demons and stuff. Yeah.
Oh yeah, like the seven
Okay.
deadly sins, and
Right.
they're all about that, right? But I say that just because it's like when you buy a new car and you see that car everywhere. It's like I saw the name
Yeah.
Winchester
Winchester.
everywhere, right?
Yeah.
So for you, I know that you mentioned you wrote a new book. So tell us
Yeah.
about the book and how you want it to be received, especially for those who are your target audience.
Hmm. Yes, the book is called Thinking Kindly: 7 Steps to Stop Self-Criticism and Change Negative Thoughts into Positive Ones. It is almost ready to launch out into the world, probably June 1st. I know we're live right now. If people are hearing this recording later, it will probably be out by then. And it is a book about recognizing the places in our lives, inside our minds, I should say, where we are unkind to ourselves and unloving to ourselves, and giving people a really simple step-by-step strategy to change those patterns. I think it's estimated that 80 to 90% of our thoughts that we have every day are repetitive from the days before and the days before that. We are just thinking and acting on autopilot, where we're reactive in our lives, especially in our relationships. This really shows up in our interpersonal, intimate relationships, where our unconscious automatic thinking and reactions will cause us to behave in a certain way that could trigger some kind of big blowout with our loved ones. So, but it all has to start from inside. This healing process has to start with a change of thinking and how our thoughts are inside our own minds. So that's really what the book is about. It's about helping us to think more kindly, thinking kindly, so that we can have really lovely, fulfilling, deep, positive relationships in our lives.
Anytime I watch interviews like online, what you just said reminds me of those interviews because it seems, at least everyone online, they have this issue that they can't make relationships work, right? Like the men are going crazy saying that all she wants me is for my money, and the women are going crazy saying that what money? You're broke, you have nothing. I pay all the bills, right? I am the table, as they would say. But what's interesting to me is I made a decision in my life that I didn't want to have any more arguments,
Mm.
right? And by arguments, I mean that there was a time where I was getting upset. You know when you feel hot inside and you're
Yeah.
like, ah, but you're so mad, right? But I was more controlled. But what I wanted to do was I wanted to give less time and energy to those people that I knew could upset me,
Yeah.
right? And what I found was people that I would be in relationships with or dating with, they would upset me more than the average person. And I didn't understand why, but why do you think that happens?
Yeah. There is, that's a big question, and my brain's going in 15 directions about how I want to answer it. But our stuff is going to come up in those closer relationships. It's easy to kind of keep our own pain bodies and our own personal historical triggers at bay when we're just interacting with strangers, with people that we're just acquaintances with, colleagues with, because there's sort of more of a surface relationship that you're not really getting deep into this place where ultimately we all fear not being loved, but when we're then starting to connect with people more deeply, it's going to uproot and stir up these unconscious fears that we're not good enough, we're not worthy enough, we're not valuable enough, we're not lovable, and there's something at stake, there's something to lose. All of that's just made up in our minds, but it's made up at a time when we're so young that we can't actually decide, no, you know what, that's not actually true. I am good, I am kind, I am lovable, I am worthy. But these old stories, these old tapes just play out. And so that's one piece is there's almost this, there's more at stake, which is why it becomes a problem. The other thing is that in the body of work that guides my mind body coaching and healing with people is this belief that projection equals perception or perception equals projection. And essentially, what that means, if I'm being triggered by something outside of myself, it's actually a reflection of something that needs healing within myself. And this is actually kind of comes out of Freud and Jung and looking at shadow work. And shadow isn't bad, it's just what's under the surface of our conscious mind. It's just what's hidden and buried from us. So the idea of it, say I'm interacting with someone and I'm like, God, they're judgmental. And I'm judging them by saying that. I'm being judgmental by judging them as being judgmental. But it's just something for me to look at. Or, gosh, they're a snooty biatch. There's something in my shadow that I need to explore and consider. So those are the two main things that A, there's more at stake in those more intimate relationships, and B, there's something within us that needs to be healed. And our unconscious mind is giving us examples of that in our outside world so that we can integrate that part of ourselves and become whole again.
When you mentioned the negative thoughts turning into positive thoughts, and when you mentioned that there's a lot of stuff beneath the surface, what's maybe something that is blocking from people taking the first step and acknowledging there's something there and then taking the next step and understanding, okay, what can I do to maybe resolve it or at least try to make sure that it doesn't hinder them in a way in the future?
Yeah. Part of it has to be about practice. And just because people are so well practiced in those habitual thoughts that are problematic, that they're triggered by or they're triggered into, we need to interrupt the pattern. So the first step is really to notice that you're having these thoughts that aren't helpful, these negative thoughts or unproductive or unkind, and start this process of pattern interruption where you can change the emotional state in your body. That's a really key component of this, so that it's more calm and more at ease, because from a more calm, at ease place, we're able to make better decisions. And we've all had that experience where, if things are really smooth in our life, it feels like we can really kind of manage and cope and strategize. And then when things are haywire and chaotic, it's harder to actually make a good decision. Like, and we might make rash decisions that we regret later, or act out in a certain way that we regret later. So after noticing our thoughts aren't helpful or kind, the next step is to really, and this I'm summarizing in a big way, but really changing our emotional state so that we can have more resourcefulness in the here and now. And then the third phase of the 7-step format and structure is to start to offer new things to think about. And we can't just jump to that stage because there's too much activation in the nervous system. If we're thinking negatively, there's a negative arousal that's happening in the nervous system. That's agitation. It might even feel like anxiety, overthinking, worrying. And we can't just flip that switch by saying, "Oh, I'm calm, I'm kind, I'm good." There needs to be a gentle sort of massaging of that into a new way of thinking. And that has to be practiced over time. If someone is in their 20s, 30s, 40s, or beyond, they've been practicing those negative thoughts for a long, long time. And you don't go to the gym just one time and get buff, right? You need to go regularly and consistently to start to be able to, have some definition in your body. And it's the same thing here. Things need to be practiced over time.
I wish that you had that answer for me about 3 months ago, and I'll share a story why, Tanya.
Okay.
There was a day, and I hope they're not watching this, that I had three exes message me in the same day, all for whatever it is they wanted. I won't get into this. I'll keep it PG. But one of the answers that I said in my mind, anyways, because I wasn't courageous enough to say it then, but I wish I did, was that, you know what? Why don't they all just show up? I'll grab the mud and just wrestle to the death, right? At least I get a benefit out of it, because it was unusual to see some people come back. And one of my friends always has a joke is that they always come back. Right? Like there's always people, I believe, to your point in your life, that they come back maybe as a test of the new Tonia, a test of the new terrain, right? Looking at it and you're saying, because you know why this ended and the reason why, and many of us won't go back to that, right? It's like when you're driving your car and you're on the road to peace and happiness. The only time you look back is to make sure that there isn't anyone chasing you, or to check your mirrors, right? You don't look back for the luggage, you're focused on the journey ahead. But one thing I had to realize, to your point, was that maybe there's work that I had to be done, because it was kind of arrogant, maybe in a way, to think that it's always that other person, whereas I'm the one picking them. I picked the last three people. Sure, they may look differently, there may be some differences around them, but there has to be a commonality, because I'm the only person that's a constant. I'm not working. Is that a difficult conversation for people to have in your experiences? If so, why?
You're speaking to this responsibility that we all have to be in charge of our own experience. And that is hard for a lot of people because, when the buck stops with you, you don't have anyone to blame, and you can't point your fingers outside and say, "Yeah, none of this has anything to do with me. It's all your fault." Wouldn't that be so nice just to defer all of that responsibility? And it is also the path to being imprisoned for life when you are willing to stand up and say, "Yeah, I'm going to own my part in this. Yeah, I chose those people and I stuck with those people even when I knew it wasn't great." there's freedom in the ability to say, yeah, this part of this is on me. Like I need to own my part of this. Otherwise, it's just going to keep repeating over and over and over again. Those wounds will never heal if you try to blame anyone outside of yourself. And another thing that I talk about with my clients is this idea of cause and effect, right? There's always some sort of cause that creates an effect, and we have a choice. We may not be aware that we have a choice, but we can either be at cause, where we're taking charge and taking responsibility for our own actions, our own thoughts, our own belief systems, our own wounds, or we can be at effect of those things in other people. So we're at effect of other people's choices. We're at effect of other people's beliefs and behaviors. One is just being like thrown in jail and the key being thrown away, and the other is liberating, but it's harder. It's harder to stand up in your truth and be like, like I made choices I'm not proud of. And when we can do that, though, we learn and we heal and we grow.
It does seem to be easier to blame, like the victim mentality, just to say that it's always Tanya's fault,
Yeah.
right? Like I didn't get this job because of you. I'm stressed out because of you.
Yeah.
I can't make any other relationships work after you because of you.
That's right.
And it right and it does feel like a prison. And I look back at my past relationships, if I wasn't aware enough to understand that I wanted to learn from it, and if I wasn't honest enough, I could easily blame the person that I dated way back in high school if I
Yeah.
really wanted to,
Yes.
right? Right? Like I could say that she warped me for all these 15 years later. And if I didn't come in contact with her, I would be the king of Canada or something, right? Why do you think it's easier for us to deflect the blame, especially when it's time after time after time?
Yeah. And I think the word that I used a minute ago is really helpful here. Where people are proud. People don't want to be wrong. People don't want to be at fault of something. And not to say that there's a fault, but people want to be proud of the decisions that they're making. And when they've made decisions that they're not proud of, it's a really hard thing to admit. One of the one of my teachers a few years ago said something that really helped me to put things in perspective, that emotions as we experience them as human beings, to have the fullest, richest experience, we need to experience all emotions, and all emotions serve a purpose. Anger, fear, sadness, they all are important when they're appropriate and warranted. And the positive ones, happiness, connection, love, joy, satisfaction, that's all important too. And the landscape of all of these different emotions makes our human experience so rich. But it's not like every day you're going to go through every moment and be 100% happy all the time. That isn't necessarily a goal to strive for. But something that you can strive for is going to bed every night and looking back on your day and saying, did I behave in a way that I'm proud of today? Did I behave in a way that I would be proud to role model for my kids, for the generation after us? Am I proud of the decisions I made today? And when we look at our history and we have decisions that we made that don't help us feel that way, and we probably made them because of our old pain story that was driving those decisions on autopilot unconsciously, it's just easier to point a finger and be like, she made me do it. He made me feel that way. I don't have anything to do with this. But it's harder to say, you know what, I was hurt, and so I behaved like I was hurt. But when we can do that, it frees us up for the most preciously deep and intimate relationships that we can imagine, or not even imagine at this point.
I look at myself, who I haven't hit 40 yet, so I'm not midlife, but I'm getting there. I'm getting there, Tanya. I'm getting there. I look at a lot of people who are my age and who are going through exactly what you said, but they're still trying to figure it out. But there seems to be like a difference between men and women, right? Like if a woman is trying to figure out in her late 30s, or sorry, in her late 30s to early 40s, if she wants to have children, the window is so close, right? It's almost closed at this point. So it's going to be, is it geriatric pregnancy? I believe it's the term is called,
Yeah, above age
right?
35 is considered that.
35. Yeah, like very high risk, right? Women, you're still young, ladies, you're still young. It's
Yeah.
just, biology is undefeated, as they would say, like the internet. But one thing that I do look for is if I were to come to you and say, hey, Tony, I'm 35 years old, I'm not married, I would want to be, is there something wrong with me? And the reason why I ask it that way is we tend to self diagnose ourselves. And if we look around, we see a lot of people who are saying that at this age, if you're not going to be married, some people ask, what is wrong with you? Why can't you make a relationship work? And then we would sometimes get reflective and think, okay, maybe something is wrong with me because I have opportunities, but they're not resulting in what I want. Right? Like, how would you maybe coach me in that scenario? Like, how would you have that conversation with me to maybe provide me with some answers that I can't, for some reason, obtain myself?
Yeah. Again, lots of ways to answer that question. What's coming to mind in a big way is making sure that the values that you have, the things that you're driven by, that you're wanting, are in line with how you're behaving. And so sometimes for folks, there's this incongruency between what they say they want and how they're acting. So if what they say they want is, to find a long-term partnership that turns into a married relationship, and they're still circling back to this other point, blaming everybody for how they feel inside, those are incongruent things, right? There has to be, a marriage isn't when two people come together and complete each other. A marriage is when two whole people come together, ideally, right? This is the healthiest version of this, and they make each other bigger and better. They're both bringing 100%. But if we're looking outside of ourselves saying, you need to fill up my 50%, you need to fill up my my 60% or whatever it is, we're not we're not going to be attracting the match that's actually going to let us thrive in that relationship, because we're going to be attracting something that, creates codependence. So value alignment is kind of one thing. What is it that you're actually like? What is it that's important about? And the question that I would spur on in with you or with other people is like, well, what's important about marriage? What's important to you about getting married? And start to mine out the underlying value structure. What's actually driving your desire for that? Is it, I need to have some sort of validation from the outside? Again, that is going to be a misaligned approach. If it's about, I want a relationship because I want someone to trust and I want to be trusted, that seems positive to say it out loud, but like, why do you need trust? Like, why don't you just already have that, right? So there would be a bit of a mining process to really excavate, what are some of the deeper inherent value systems, but then also what are some of the wounds that are blocking those value systems from actually coming to the surface?
I dated someone that needed validation and attention like you wouldn't believe.
Yeah.
And it was insatiable. I couldn't satisfy it at all. And I say that because how do you, how would I build with someone? like that? Or how would you build with someone that that becomes codependent on you?
Yeah.
Right. Like there was someone we used to go to the gym. Well, we didn't go to the gym, but I used to see her at the gym. And she became so codependent on her ex at that time. I interviewed her when I first started. She had no idea until one day she woke up and she's like, "Hey, he's on my bank accounts. He has access to my money. He's joined on the business I started. He ended up taking over the business from her. When she got injured, she had some kind of injury or sickness, and she was bedridden. He wasn't supportive of her, and he eventually moved on to someone else with her money in hand, her business in hand, and things of this nature. But in the beginning, Tanya, of that relationship, she would tell you that she was in love. She was so smitten. She had stardust in her eyes. Love knew no limits. But when she looked back, she realized how much she gave up. And even when it ended, it was like she couldn't remember who she was prior to the relationship. She had lost herself. And a part of me thinks that maybe because I believe men and women love so differently, I wonder, and I don't have the stats on this, I wonder if that's something that impacts women more than men, because men tend to be a little bit more independent than women. If I look at the personality types, women tend to be more agreeable. They tend to be more given into negative thoughts and emotions. I wonder if that plays a factor in them being more likely to be codependent on their partner versus men. What are your thoughts?
I was just actually listening to some people talk about attachment styles yesterday, and I think some of that applies here. There's sort of that anxious attachment, anxious, insecure attachment where they need that external validation. And they're going to be, texting several times a day and just constantly making bids for attention and affection from their partner. And then there's the avoidant attachment style where they have learned that independence, that they can't depend on anyone, that they can't be vulnerable around anyone, that they have to sort of maintain their own internal structure separate from anyone else. And everyone might have different flavors of these attachment styles, or someone could be completely securely attached in that they trust themselves, they trust others, like they're pretty easygoing. But that what you talked about with those early moments in that relationship are really crucial, because we can get so those love chemicals when we first are connecting with someone, and you know things are progressing, and it's just like oxytocin, dopamine, serotonin highs all the time. Things get clouded, and the new so maybe you meet someone on your volleyball team, or some you have some shared common interest, and there's this excitement and this pull and this magnetism that, oh, there's this other human being that I can kind of share this experience with, and it creates this crazy salad of chemicals inside our body. What a pharmacy that is. That then when that newness, the novelty starts to wear off and fade, and these old attachment styles from, again, these old childhood wounds that have been unhealed, they start to really kind of latch on and become more prevalent. And I've heard that. I've been there too, where I get out of a relationship and I'm just like, holy crap, like who was I there in that for those 2 years? Like I remember one of my early relationships, and this is when I was still, early 20s, and one of my I'm a dancer. I've danced my entire life, and it's my biggest passion and hobby outside of helping people change their lives. But one of my girlfriends was just like, Tonia, we never go out dancing anymore. And I said these words. I was like, nah, I don't really like dancing. Like, who is this person? Like, that's not me at all. And that pattern repeated itself again in the next long-ish term relationship. And at the end of that second one, when I was like, again, who was I being? That's not someone I'm proud of being. I made this vow to never ever lose myself in relationship again. And I think then I kind of swung the other way where it was like completely, I need to be independent and, I'm not going to let anybody affect me and I'm just going to be on my path. And if someone wants to be along for the ride, cool, but I'm not going to stop to go on their path. And that had its own problems, right? That was um, quite distancing and lonely, right? So over time, as we work to heal our thinking and heal our thoughts and feelings, like we can come to a place where there's a happy balance of these bonds and relationships that are actually lift us up and support us instead of kind of sucking us down into an old pit of despair.
How can we find the solution to that? Because
Mm.
despair is everywhere.
Yeah. Yeah, wow, that's kind of a sad truth. Despair is everywhere and it rhymes, so it's catchy.
Oh yeah,
But at
when it
the
rhymes, it's
yeah.
always catchy. Like, it's like a slogan, right? It's like my American friends, I don't want to do this to you guys because I know you guys don't like the guys. Like, make America great again.
Oh, yeah.
It's like make relationships great again at this point, right? Because you go online and that's like probably the first thing we access. And it just seems that men and women can't get along. And we've been getting along for centuries, right? But it's just like the last 10, 15 years with the rise of I want to say the red pill men and the rise of the transitioning from the fourth generation feminists, there seems to be like this conflict, right? And there's this joke that I made online and some other people make it online too. They're two different sides of the same coin because a lot of the complaints that they have against each other are what they're doing. So, for example, you'll have, because many of my friends are like this, right? So you have men that say that I don't want to date any female over 30. So they're going to go 25. In Canada, legal age is 18. So let me preface that for those in America. So they're going to go from 18 to 25 because that's what they want because they say that they have less baggage, there's less mileage, take that how you want it, and there's less what's the word I'm looking for? There's less of a need to maybe deal with some of the heartbreak that they've gone through before because in general, the older you are, the more relationships you had, right? In general. And then on the flip side, you have women saying about men that men aren't ready. They don't necessarily want to date someone that's older, even though they may be more mature, is because they want someone who's 25. He has to be making $100,000, have his own house, his own car, and so on and so forth. And most men that age just don't have that. That's just the reality, right? So they're complaining about each other, not knowing that they're both underprepared or not prepared at all to be in the type of relationship that they want. But instead of realizing it, they just continue to live in their own echo chamber and just harbor, and it grows. So you have some people that are serial daters because everyone's dating online. And it's swipe, 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 right? Right. But they're dealing with crap after crap after crap after crap. And then you sprinkle in a good man in there or a good woman in there. And because they've they've jaded themselves in a way, they mistreat that person and they demand more from that nice person versus Tyrone down the street, for lack of a better word, right? So when I say grief, when I say despair is everywhere, it just seems that there's some people who want a relationship so bad, but they want it in a way that they have to do the least amount of work possible. Right? So when you're dealing with your clients now, how do you get them motivated, inspired to maybe do the type of work that a lot of people apparently don't want to do because they're going to have to be in the mud, in the trenches to make it work.
Yeah. I mean, we get out what we put in, right? So if we're not willing to do the healing that's required to come to a relationship whole, then, again, we have to say that's on us. Like, that's my bad. I need to show up and do this. I had a thought as you were talking that I'm gonna just let come back to me. It's gone away, but I'm gonna let it little Bo Peep its way back into my brain. What I do with people is this very systematic approach where the first thing that we do is we make sure that all of the old negative unresolved emotions, we call them the big five, are neurologically different. So we swipe out anger, sadness, fear, hurt, and guilt. We remove them from the person's neurology, not so that they can't ever experience them, but so that they experience them only in a way that's appropriate and warranted. The next thing that we do is we discharge any old residual traumatic events so that those old painful experiences of the past, whether they're, family of origin traumatic experiences or old relationship traumatic experiences, they're neutralized so that there's not that old automatic trigger pattern. And there's that tendency to engage in the same relationship with a different face and maybe a different body, it disappears because they're no longer still latched on to the pain of the past. So this is the first thing that we do, and this takes about 6 to 8 hours. Oh, that's maybe a bit of an exaggeration. Let's say 6, 7 hours of time together, which really isn't that much in the grand scheme of things in the decades of our lives. Like, that's not a lot. And the work that I do is content free, which means that people who come to me as a client, I often don't know what it is they're clearing. I often don't know the details of the events that we're shifting, and I don't have to as the practitioner. Their unconscious mind knows the thing that we're healing and working on. So that neural pathway of telling that old story is unnecessary. We don't need to keep paving it. We can just change it. But then the next thing that we do, which I think is circling back to your point, is that we reconnect to positive emotional states throughout their entire past, where we go back and we implant, let's say, love, trust, connection, peace, ease, joy into their history in their unconscious mind, because our memories are very changeable. They're very malleable. We cannot trust what our memories are telling us, but we can go back and introduce these flavors of things that we want to experience. So now as we're swiping, right, we are, or left, I don't know which it is. We are sorry, that's a generation below me. I don't know. Not to say that if I needed to look for love that way, I might do it that way. I don't know. I'm not in that scenario. But as we're swiping, now we're coming to this with this wholeness instead of this emptiness or this thing that we're hoping someone else will fill. And that's actually going to attract something better. The other thing is like, and this is the little Bo Peep moment. She's come back to me with her little bell on and wagging her little tail, ding-a-ling-a-ling. Uh, if we can, and you kind of said it in a different way, and I'm going to spin on this. If we can be okay with who we are, where we are right now, whether we're single or not, but let's just say we're single, if we can be 100% okay with that, then it's more likely that we're going to attract a mate that we can stay with longer term. And again, it's sort of this, we don't need to have someone else fill us up kind of thing. I know for me, I've been married now. I've been with my husband since 2008, 16 years. Thank you. And I remember after that second, and actually, I'm going to say there was a third version of that pattern that I was like, who am I in this? I don't know. I've lost myself. So after the third one, um, truth be told, when I was like, never again, like, I'm done with this, I was just like, I'm gonna just get old and have a lot of cats and have a lot of, I called them mantics, and sexcapades. Like, I was just gonna like be this, what's the spinster? Is that the right word? That was my plan for my life. And I was 100% okay with that being my future. And within that, maybe 6 months of me being like, okay, well, this is what I'm gonna do. I found this love that I could make my lobster and my forever love, right? So when we can step back and trust that we're good as we are without anyone else, that's most likely when we're going to be able to be open and receptive to the perfect energy of the person coming in.
Preach, Tanya,
Woo!
preach. Amen to that. Let them know it's out there. Because you're a walking example of that, right? You gave the example of yourself, and then you said that you've been married for as long as you have, and you've worked it out. And you made the joke like cats, because that seems to be what women joke about, right? I'm gonna be that cat lady in that shoe house with a whole bunch of bebes kids, right? Oh my god, I'm showing my age. What am I doing right now? But but you're absolutely right, because that's all that we can do is either we have to accept, get comfortable, and be happy with our current state, or if we want more, we have to go out there and get more. But we can't be afraid to make the to make the changes necessary, because I strongly believe most of our issues are self-inflicted.
Yes. 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 Even if people are behaving like right ass dicks to us, we're still the ones making the interpretation of being wounded inside. And so that is completely self-inflicted. Nobody makes you feel anything. Your feelings are your responsibility. And that's a full circle to what we were talking about at the beginning of this episode. Like we need to own our own stuff, own our choices, own our feelings, own, yeah, I reacted this way and I'm not proud of it.
So, as
Hmm.
we close, what advice do you want to give our audience today to help them find the success and the love that they so badly want?
Yeah, work on yourself, heal your stuff, clean up what needs to be cleaned up. If you can imagine, if I, okay, I don't know why this metaphor just came to me, but well, my husband's just been making some barbecue sauce for this party that we're going to on the weekend. And he has got all these ingredients that he needs to add to the sauce to make the sauce delicious. And every single one of those ingredients is important. None of those ingredients can come half-assed to the sauce. Each ingredient has to come whole to make the sauce as good as possible. So you have to, as you're really wanting to connect with another human being, make sure that you're wanting to connect with the human being that you are. And so this, mirroring, this perception equals projection again. Like if you can imagine the person that you really want to attract, and if even if you write down those qualities and those characteristics, A, know that you want them because at some point inside you, you have them. But B, be willing to say, okay, when I'm getting triggered in my life, it's because there's something inside me that is trying to heal. And if you're willing to show up and be responsible for that, you're going to be available for wonderful, divine, even relationships coming your way.